What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Elite Heat, the only show you need on Mondays. I'm excited. I'm hyped up. We're talking about Chris Jericho today. I love doing wrestler bios. I love deep diving on one specific wrestler. It's just a favorite of mine. So yeah, like I said, we're gonna talk about Chris Jericho, man. I mean, he's got like 100 different nicknames, and he's just so synonymous. He has so much to talk about that we're gonna make this a two-parter. We're gonna do a bio of his early days from WCW, WWF, and then WWE. And then next week, we're going to follow it up and we're going to talk all about current day Chris Jericho from New Japan to AEW. But first of all, we bring in the elitist. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing good, Kevin. I'm excited. This is going to be a fun two-parter into... I don't know which nickname to use because, as you say, there's so many to describe Chris Jericho. I mean, this guy, 30-plus years in the wrestling business and at least like over 2 decades being in like the prominent public spotlight. Like this guy, his career, it encompasses so much. And really what we're going to try and do in this part, okay, this Elite Heat episode, which is Elite Heat 18, I believe, we're going to really try and go into everything from his upbringing through, I dare say, around the list of Jericho time, around 2017-ish. We're going to try and go through that in ample detail. Will we cover absolutely everything Jericho's ever done in flawless detail? No, we're not going to be here for 5 hours doing that. What we're going to try and do, bring you the most important parts of his career, important parts of his legacy in an entertaining fashion. So, Kevin, what do you want to do now?
Well, I think we should start off from the very beginning, from the early days. And it's safe to say Chris Jericho, along with Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, they're one of the pioneers of like touring the indies, starting off wrestling in gyms, wrestling overseas in Germany, Japan, you name it. And then finding their way to the big time after, being in the wrestling business. Jericho was in the wrestling business for like 10 years, from 1990 to 1999, before he really, before he really got his big break into WWE, because he was in WCW, but they weren't the number one company, so.
Ooh.
He's the pioneer of that. I think it's pretty fair to say.
Yeah, but like one thing with Jericho that really sets him apart. It's a couple of things, because you look at Jericho, you mentioned the pristine like indie career. This guy wrestled all over the world. He had like a year or so stint in Mexico where, he's talked about this in interviews and podcasts where he'd have legitimate younger Mexican types who legitimately wanted to kill him because he was, he stood out. He was a foreigner to them. He at times he kind of feared for his safety early on, but he grew to be accustomed to everything. So he had time in Mexico, stuff in Japan, like all over the world. This guy, wrestled the Canadian indie scene where he was trained and all this kind of stuff. He wrestled all the indies, and then he made his way through ECW, WCW. But the thing with Jericho is that unlike the guys nowadays who their careers are kind of similar, you work all over the world and make it to the E, it's very different because Jericho, as we'll talk about in the next 2 parts of this bio, he had the charisma, the character, the business mind, the thought of reinvention. What can I do to better my game? What can I do to appeal to more viewers? That's one thing that set Jericho apart. So yeah, we'll save that more so for part 2. A lot of that kind of talk.
No, just generally speaking, to be fair, I'll just say this briefly. There are modern examples of what Jericho has done. AJ Styles is probably the most notable. There's Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens. We've seen examples of guys that once they go from the indies to the big time in WWE, they adapt or they change their style for better.
True, but how many done it as good as Chris Jericho? How many done it like Chris Jericho? Chris Jericho was the founding father of it. He did this in the 90s when he was traveling the indie scene all over the world. He had an infamous, all these like great matches, cruiserweight type matches. He wrestled, different type of styles. He was adaptable, and then he came into the big leagues and he had something to him. It wasn't just, this is indie guy 101, go have a great match. It was, here's a character. He's fresh. He's compelling. So just wanted to get that out there. Just wanted to address that towards the start because I think it's something that's important to mention with Jericho. Something that really sets this guy apart from literally everyone you'd see in a modern day setting, Kevin.
Absolutely. I think we don't really need to talk about what he did in Mexico, Germany. I do want to talk about briefly his WCW stint. I think it's really necessary for us to do if we're going to cover Chris Jericho. Most notably, when you think WCW and you think Chris Jericho and WCW specifically, what's the first thing that you think of, like, or some of the first things that really like you associate WCW with Chris Jericho's time there?
Okay, I think three things. I think the stuff with Goldberg.
Mhm.
I think the cruiserweight stuff he did with, a bunch of the guys, Malenko, etc. And I think of the infamous segment where he was reading the 1,000 holds. But those are the three things I think of. Kevin, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. I think of Monday Night Jericho. I think of his animosity towards Bischoff for a while, or it seems like animosity. I mean, they downplay it, but it seems like he had animosity towards him. And then I guess, I mean, like, when it comes to Jericho, it's just like he was ahead of his time. I would say, like, I think if you took 1996 Chris Jericho and you just dropped him in WWE in like 2012, he'd be like one of the big stars in wrestling. I could you agree?
Oh, God, yeah. Well, that's one of the things with Jericho as well, because, I mean, it goes back to the whole reinvention thing. This guy, in any place, in any setting, would find a way to be a star. He'd find a way to do something that makes you care. Like the Chris Jericho, he's famously said himself, he said this on the Broken Skull sessions with Austin literally a week ago, literally says, if you get 1 minute of TV time, make that the best minute on the show. Make that minute the thing that the viewer thinks, that was my favorite minute of that 2 hours. Like that's the whole approach of Jericho. So in that regard, his WCW run, which we can talk about a bit more in a moment, like he was given maybe a backstage segment, and Jericho, here's a minute and a half. This is Eric Bischoff speaking. You have a minute and a half to do a backstage segment. That's all you're going to get for the night. So Jericho would try and do the most creative, compelling backstage segment, and this is where you get stuff like Kevin Jericho impersonating Goldberg's entrance. Only you had a random just fat guy wearing like a ripped up singlet, and then you had some other guy as the security guards. Stuff like that gets spawned from that mentality, Kevin.
Right, and you mentioned his his willingness to maximize whatever TV time he's given. He didn't have that sense of entitlement that you see amongst a lot of wrestlers nowadays, or you hear about in the dirt sheets. And I think it's a credit to his upbringing. I mean, he was raised by a dad who was a hockey player, and he was raised in Winnipeg, and apparently that's not a nice place to live. According to him, it's a tough place to grow up in. And I think it's all about just, foundation, how you were brought up, how you were raised, and definitely Chris Jericho took that into his mindset, his philosophy with wrestling. And yeah, I mean,
that's a great point. Sorry to cut you off there. That's a great point you make about just the business as a whole. I mean, Russo's big on this one as well. It's this whole thing where, like, back in the day, supposedly, and when we mean back in the day, we mean this period of Jericho we're talking about now, your 90s, late 90s, early 2000s particularly, the wrestlers, yes, most of them were fans growing up, generally speaking, but when they got into the business, the mentality was more, what can I do to make money? What can I do to help this business move forward? And Jericho had that exact mentality. Whereas in a modern setting, what you more so see is wrestlers who have wrestled a great indie regime for 10 to 15 years, come into WWE, come into AEW with an entitlement there. Oh, well, I've had matches given 5 stars by Meltzer. I've made it in this business. The business is revolving around me. And it's like, well, no. And then Jericho was never like that. Jericho was always, how can I reinvent the wheel? What can I do to make money for this business? How can I be a better version of myself to help the product? And that's something you got to commend about Jericho, Kevin.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's one of the best. Like, some of my favorite WCW moments involving Chris Jericho. One I think of is the mock Goldberg entrance, which was just great. With his security guy. I forgot his name. The fat guy that you mentioned. And then you have, like, just the matches he had with Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Dean Malenko, that usually they were kicking off pay-per-views. They were one of the first or second matches on a pay-per-view. They were one of the first or second matches on an episode of Nitro. And they were really good. It was this hybrid style that really hadn't been seen before in the United States. And I would say that Jericho, Eddie, Dean Malenko, all those guys are innovators in that respect. And I think Jericho doesn't get enough credit nowadays for how innovative he was during the mid-90s, simply because he's managed to stay relevant, and he's managed to stay current, and he's managed to adapt with the times. And I think it's important to look at the mid-90s and think about that style of wrestling that really changed wrestling for better or worse,
Absolutely. I mean, it brought that style of indie wrestling onto a big time mainstream show. Like WCW in 96 especially, 97 for the whole year, and the first third of 1998, that was the number one show in wrestling. That was a show that most people were watching. That had Hulk Hogan leading the NWO. You had all the big names in wrestling was in WCW. And near enough every night, what would open the show? Jericho versus Juventud Guerrero, Jericho against Psychosis, Eddie versus Ray, Eddie versus Malenko, etc., etc. You guys get the point. It would be these cruiserweight matches, which fans, viewers, they'd tune into. They'd see this great 10 to 15 minute match of these guys doing these crazy moves and think, oh, wow, that was fun. I really enjoyed that. What's next on the show? And it would have its place. It would be fun. It'd be entertaining. And then you move on with the show. Whereas, as we talk about modern wrestling, which this is something I want to make a theme of this like Jericho kind of podcast, talk about kind of the legacy and what Jericho did and how that paved the way going forward and how things have changed, because we're a topical podcast, Kevin. That's what we do, man. So, like, legit, you look at modern days, and now the wrestlers who would be wrestling in the opening matches against Chris Jericho, now these are the ones main eventing in NXT. These are the ones main eventing in AEW. These are the ones having the demanding the 10-minute matches on WWE main roster programming. And it's like, once again, Jericho had his place back then, made the best of the material, and he kept growing and growing. That's going to be a recurring theme with this podcast, Kevin. Chris Jericho kept reinventing himself. He kept changing with the times, and you got to commend it.
Absolutely. Another moment I want to focus on, too, is the conspiracy storyline that he did in WCW. It's one of my favorite just angles and storylines, where he's at the White House, not in the White House, but he's around that area in D.C. He's marching around with a picket fence saying, or not a picket fence, a picket sign saying that Bill Clinton is out to take the World Television Belt or the Cruiserweight Belt, whatever it was, that Bill Clinton is out to get Chris Jericho. If you haven't seen this, I highly recommend you check it out. It's just, we've seen this character, this angle been ripped off as recently as Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn ripped it off word for word almost, right? With his conspiracy theory angle that he was doing on SmackDown for the better half of 2021.
Yep, and this is just another one of these segments. Jericho had the initiative, he had the thought, wanted to make the best of his minute or two of TV. Bischoff says, you've got a 2-minute segment, do something with it. And Jericho thought, how can I do something funny that would progress the storyline, it would make people care? I'm going to do this segment. And he thought of the segment you described there, and it went over well. You remember it, Kevin. This was in, 1997?
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken?
Around there,
24 years ago. And it laid the foundation for segments like Sami Zayn doing the conspiracy. When Sami Zayn on SmackDown, 2 months ago, handcuffed himself to a guardrail and was, holding up that sign saying, justice for Sami. Like that kind of stuff. Jericho was the founding father of just stuff like that. The legacy of this man, it just can't go unstated.
Absolutely. And I would say that let's move to what Jericho is most known for, arguably, from his WCW stint, and that's his feud with Goldberg. And if you hear Jericho describe it, Goldberg, Eric Bischoff, Hulk Hogan, all the people that mattered in the WCW office was highly against this program. And still, Jericho made it work. For whatever reason, I would say that this story is more well known for the backstage politics about it than what actually transpired on TV. Because realistically, what it was Jericho calling out Goldberg for 3 to 4 weeks. You had the fake Goldberg entrance, and then you get Goldberg spearing Chris Jericho into the third row of the arena. And they never really had a pay-per-view match like they could have. They were building toward it, but they didn't do it. It was supposed to be world champion versus television champion. And it just didn't happen for whatever reason. But I think that's one of the more famous, urban legends, right? For lack of a better term. That's one of the more famous urban legends or myths of the wrestling business is what happened with Goldberg and Chris Jericho.
Yeah, most definitely. You mentioned the politics there. That's a big one. You guys know this. If you're listening to this, WCW and politics, it goes hand in hand. Wrestling's always had politics, but WCW in this time period, this is 1998. You've got literally Bischoff, you've got Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, you've got Kevin Nash, Hall, you've got Goldberg, the amount of politics backstage and that main event scene, especially that company, my God. So they see this guy Jericho, who, what would Jericho have been then? Jericho would have been what, 215 pounds, 220 pounds, and compared to them, they're all the heavyweights. They see this guy who's been wrestling cruiserweight matches and who's doing good work, but he's a cruiserweight. He's Jericho. Who cares? And then he sees, they see this thing where Jericho is getting this potential feud with Goldberg, off the ground, and you've got fans wanting to see Jericho versus Goldberg. And then, the political side of things, they're just like, oh, we don't want that. And then they just either try and bury Jericho, brush it off, forget about it. We don't want to see that. And it's like, you're missing out on a chance to make money. Like, forget where you see Jericho on the card. It would have been fun. Yeah, Goldberg, as Jericho said himself, Goldberg would have squashed Jericho in 2 minutes of the pay-per-view if they actually did it. But at the end of the day, it would have been funny. It would have been memorable. But instead, they just didn't do it, Kevin. Classic WCW, pal.
Yeah, that's one thing, good or bad, you could say about Vince McMahon is that he will always at one point, he will always strive to get dream matches and the best product out in the ring. Yeah, Sting versus Undertaker didn't happen. But, we did get John Cena versus Undertaker. We did get Cena versus Rock twice. We might get Rock versus Reigns. We got Rock versus Hogan. Vince rarely ever lets politics and personal feelings get in the way of making money, And Goldberg versus Jericho, that would have been a big moneymaker for WCW. They could have done it at a big pay-per-view, like Halloween Havoc or something. And like Jericho said, just have Goldberg beat him. But, is what it is. And that's the big reason that Jericho left WCW. He was like, look, I'm not going to succeed here. There's clearly a glass ceiling. Maybe I could go to the WWF and I'll have better success because Eric Bischoff and Hogan and those guys just didn't see him as a big star. So that transitions us perfectly to his debut in WWE, unless you want to cover anything from WCW.
Not really. I mean, if you want to go into specifics of how Jericho's exit, I mean, you can listen to his Broken Skull Sessions interview with Austin. He goes into full detail on the verbal agreement, the stuff with Bischoff, and essentially you covered it there perfectly. Jericho himself was self-aware. He was ambitious enough. He's not an impulse decision maker, but he gets that feeling of, I'm not going to be the top guy here. I can do better somewhere else. I'm going to go pursue that, which you've got to commend about Jericho. So he saw that at WCW. They did, the shenanigans with Bischoff and the contract not being re-signed, et cetera, et cetera. He makes a couple of, he makes a stop to Vince McMahon's house, infamously tells that story. And then Kevin, we wind up to the countdown to the new millennium.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's safe to say that this is one of the top 5 debuts in wrestling history.
Hell yes. Top 3, I'd say, honestly.
Yeah, it's up there with The Undertaker's debut, Kane's debut, John Cena.
Yeah.
There's just, so many great debuts. I mean, you could even make an argument this was the best debut. You have, perfect timing. This new millennium clock counts down. They've been running this vignette for maybe 2-3 months. It's the countdown to the millennium. It's going to expire, blah, blah, blah. And then it expires while The Rock is in the middle of the ring cutting a promo. So out comes Chris Jericho. Maybe some people in the crowd knew who he was, people that watched WCW, but casual viewers that were just going to watch wrestling that don't really know too much about wrestling were like, oh, who's this Chris Jericho guy? And he comes out looking like a star. He looks like a rock star. The entrance, the presentation, this one moment, his debut was better than anything he had done in WCW by a large mile. I mean, you could just see the difference in production and value and presentation in the WWE and WCW. It was just as clear as day when you look at Jericho's debut. I mean, what can you say about it? He goes word for word with The Rock in this verbal sparring of words. I mean, it was an awesome moment, It really was.
Well, the thing with that, I mean, it was everything. It was so much coming together perfectly because, I mean, Vince McMahon, he was the one who, I mean, Jericho said this on the Broken Skull interview. It was essentially they were going to have Jericho, come out to open because the countdown clock was, about to hit 0. But Vince McMahon said, why don't we have you come out during the middle of a Rock promo in the middle of the show? Which, right there, you go from, okay, let's say Jericho, he comes out to open Raw. I mean, this is Raw's War in August of 99. This is the number 1 show. This is borderline beating Monday Night Football in viewership. So you've got Jericho. If you open the show, it would have been a cool moment. But instead you have him interrupt The Rock. This is Dwayne Johnson at his apex. This is 1999 Dwayne Johnson. He's cutting, doing all the catchphrases. Everyone's locked in on him. Countdown clock comes on the screen. The crowd's what's happening? What is this? And then they do the big video graphic, and then Jericho comes on the screen. Crowd goes crazy. Jericho standing there, back to the audience. It's just, it was presence. It commanded attention. It was character. The promo off with Rock and Jericho was fantastic. And the way they literally wrote that was Jericho, Rock, and a writer just in a room for half an hour. They figured the whole thing out. Segment worked. Easy. The Rock let Jericho have the floor. The Rock, in his apex, let Jericho have that time. Something which WCW never did. So, I mean, Kevin, just phenomenal all around. Like, straight up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's all you can say. But then, immediately after the debut, really nothing comes from it. We don't really get a lengthy Rock vs. Jericho program. What, like 3 months later, Chris Jericho is not on a pay-per-view. You know, he's notably left off a pay-per-view. I forgot what it was. And then he's losing to China at Survivor Series. Just, I mean, crazy. You know, he's entering this long-term story with China. Loses the Intercontinental Championship to her. And China's great, but it's a male wrestler losing to a female wrestler, and Jericho wasn't too thrilled about that. You know, it didn't make a lot of sense to him, and I don't think it made a lot of sense to people that were watching at the time. But, I mean, could you imagine if that happened in 2021? You know, like...
Oh my god. I was about to ask you the exact same thing. Imagine, Kevin, you have people acting as if the WWF creative team or Vince McMahon came to their house and shot a loved one. That's how people would be acting. Oh my god, this is disgusting what they're doing in Jericho. This company their stock should crash and burn to zero tomorrow. How dare they? When really what this was is Jericho getting like the Vince test. You know, Vince McMahon seeing whether Jericho is trustworthy, all this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
You know? Like,
yeah, exactly. Not everybody's buried. Not everybody is destroyed. You know, whatever you want, whatever term you want to use.
Yeah, how did that burial turn out for Jericho, Kevin? No one talks about Jericho 21 years after this happened. Jericho's career was done and dusted. He was finished. He was totally buried by China, pal.
Right.
Like,
right. And instead, nobody, like, people don't even remember that this happened. You know, there's some people listening to this podcast right now that are going, what? China beat Chris Jericho? When did that happen?
Yeah. But, like, even then, one thing I've got to say, this is China in 99. Like, this is what, you know, this is like this is a superstar. This is a woman who is being marketed as just like a larger than life like machine, you know, Kevin?
Absolutely. Like, it's China. It's still China. And like there really is no modern comparison to put here. Like the only thing I could think of is something like if Kenny Omega debuted in WWE and he lost to Charlotte like a month after he debuted. Like that's really like
that's a good comparison, to be fair. That's legit what this would be, in fairness.
Right. Like that's like the only thing I could think of. And like, yeah, oh my god, just imagine. Bro. Just imagining the reaction collectively from the internet community if Kenny Omega lost to Charlotte Flair. It would be, I don't even want to think about it. It would just be scary, bro.
It would be like once again, people acting as if legitimately a loved one of theirs was being like assassinated in front of them. That's how people would act. Because a lot of these people who'd freak out act as though wrestling is real. Instead of just this being a TV show where behind the scenes it's just the boss testing whether, you know, Jericho, the new employee, big signing, is going to be loyal and stick with them and, you know, put him through his paces before he gets the rewards and benefits down the line. Instead of that, you'd have people who act as though this is life and death. Act as though Jericho losing some matches on a kayfabe show is the worst thing ever. And that's what this China thing was. And then as we move into 2000, Kevin, Jericho was, you know, he was set up perfectly to go and have a great career, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you transition to 2000. He had a great little rivalry with Benoit and Kurt Angle. Mostly Benoit. And yeah, this is never going to be mentioned. WWE is never going to celebrate this, and rightfully so. But at the time in 2000, Jericho and Benoit had one of the best undercard stories going in the year 2000. It was really good stuff. Arguably the best matches that both guys had in ring in WWE. You know, you can make that discussion, but we're not going to talk about that for too long. Really, what's notable about Jericho's 2000 is this moment on a random episode of Raw on April 17th, right after WrestleMania 2000, where Jericho beats Triple H for the WWF Championship after, you know, Earl Hebner, he made a fast count or whatever, and then, like, the decision got reversed, and Jericho lost the title. But it's like, the fan reaction when Jericho won the title and everybody thought that he was champion, it was crazy. And then just for people to have, you know, oh, we're going to reverse it, pal. People turned on Triple H. People hated Triple H. It got the job done for what it was. Whatever you want to say about it, it got the job done. It made Triple H a hated heel.
Yeah, it goes to show a couple of things. Like, really, I mean, Jericho told the story once again. Broken Skull Sessions interview tells the story of literally, apparently, this is Jericho's version of events. Apparently, that day, April 17th, or whenever they taped the show, I believe it was April 17th. Jericho is, going through the backstage area. He's like, I'm gonna go talk to Vince. I'm not content with what I'm doing, and if I'm not content with what I'm doing, I want to pursue something else. Maybe this isn't meant for me. So Jericho, walks past some writer, and then he tells him this. Then he goes to Vince, and Vince is like, "You're winning the title tonight." And Jericho's like, "I'm sorry, what?" Legit. And then, like, the other thing with this, it was a Vince McMahon test. And what would the reaction be like if Jericho won the title? Could Jericho get a good reaction as champion? And, he passed that with flying colors. They do this whole Earl Hebner fast count angle, and the crowd erupts, Kevin. Like, this crowd went absolutely insane. So that goes to show Vince and everyone watching, okay, this Jericho guy has something. If going forward we ever choose to give him the title for real, he's going places. And apparently that night, Jericho was literally looking in a mirror. He has the world title belt around his waist. And he's just smiling ear to ear. His childhood dream's been achieved. And he's literally, I think Vince patted him on the back and goes, "Oh, it's not gonna be the last time that happens, Chris." And then from then on, his career was set.
Absolutely, yeah. He obviously, we all know he goes on to win the WWF Championship in 2001. And he defeated The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin on the same night. He wins the WWF Championship and the WCW Championship to become the first ever undisputed champion. An achievement that Chris Jericho will never let you forget. I mean, all the way up until his last days in WWE, he was mentioning this moment in promos, right? Like, it is an iconic moment, and it's something that is remembered fondly. Like, this is something that it's not really pushed under the wayside. People still think about this. They still talk about it because of the magnitude of it. It just Jericho pinning Stone Cold and The Rock clean in the same night. It's crazy to even fathom, right?
Well, I'm trying to think right now of like a modern day equivalent, and I'm struggling. The same thing as pinning. Well, because there's no guys who are comparable to Rock and Austin. This is legit the guys who've near enough single-handedly been responsible for beating WCW in the ratings and the Monday Night Wars. Jericho beats them both in back-to-back matches on the same night to become the first ever undisputed champion. That is insane. That's the same thing as literally maybe a Kenny Omega or one of these type of guys from an AEW coming to WWE and within 2 years or a bit over 2 years pinning Roman Reigns and pinning Cena or Edge, one of those type of guys, and becoming the undisputed champion. It's nuts. Like that. Wow.
It's unheard of. It's unheard of. Yeah, when I think of Jericho, when I think of Chris Jericho, this is one of the first things that I think of. It's just synonymous. It's synonymous with Jericho. It's synonymous with the Attitude Era. It's like if I don't even know, bro. It's like if Hulk Hogan and Macho Man got pinned on the same night by Ricky Steamboat or something. There really is no comparison for it. It's unheard of. It was a great moment. The only thing that people could say is that it didn't happen at a big pay-per-view. It was at Vengeance, a bit of a big
when that's one of those IWC type things, isn't it, Kevin?
Yeah.
It's like, well, this happened, but it could have, but this could have. Okay, yes, it could have happened at WrestleMania. Honestly, I mean, if you did that WrestleMania 18, you wouldn't have got Rock versus Hogan. So at the same time, kind of good it happened at a pay-per-view that wasn't WrestleMania. But just generally speaking, I mean, I guess that leads us into this one, Kevin. WrestleMania 18, Chris Jericho main events. Yeah, wasn't the best, was it?
No. No. It wasn't the best. It wasn't the best, and it's not really because of Jericho and Triple H. A lot of people say, but the in-ring action was so good. It's one of the best matches Jericho and Triple H ever had. Doesn't really matter when nobody cares in the audience, in the live audience. You got 60,000 people who are just exhausted from watching Rock and Hogan, which should have main evented. I think Jericho and Triple H have both been on record and said that. You got 60,000 people who are just out of their mind exhausted. They don't even want to, they want to go home. The show, in their mind, the show is over. Now they got to sit back and watch this main event. And the storyline going into it was pretty good, I would say. You have, Stephanie McMahon aligning with Chris Jericho. Triple H, he makes his big return to WWE after being away for like 9 months in one of the most memorable returns in WWE history at Madison Square Garden.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he comes back as a babyface, you know. I mean, I think that's probably what worked, what went against this match was the fact that Triple H is just not a good babyface. You know, he's just not. It is what it is. Jericho is a great heel, one of the best heels. But Triple H is just not as good of a babyface. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest problem, honestly. Aside from having to follow Rock and Hogan, I just think the chemistry and the elements here, something was off.
Yeah, I mean, it's just natural. It's like that fatigue from an audience. Like, you watch Rock and Hogan, which is like one of, if not the biggest matches ever, featuring, to that point, probably, I mean, this can be debated, like 2 of the 3 biggest stars ever in wrestling, you know? Like 2 of the biggest 4, like whatever you want to say, just this huge match. And Jericho and Triple H are just forced to go on 30 minutes after that. You know, it's like, okay, as you say, they both go on record and said, you know, they realistically shouldn't have main evented. Like, there was no following Rock and Hogan. And just generally speaking, I mean, in fairness, Jericho and Triple H drew a better crowd reaction, even with the fatigued crowd, than most people will get nowadays when there's a crowd. But forget that. The fact of the matter is, crowd was fatigued. The match itself was a good match, but there are thousands of good matches out there, Kevin. You know, it's just that crowd investment wasn't there, and as a result, it's just this match just gets forgotten. It gets blown by the wayside. People think WrestleMania 18. They think of Rock Hogan primarily. Then you think of Taker Flair, and then you might think of Stone Cold against Scott Hall, and then this match is like 3rd or 4th that you think of. You know?
Yeah, like, I mean, yeah. That's it, you know. Nobody's gonna think of Triple H and Jericho. It's just unfortunate, you know. It really is because
also, it was too predictable as well. That was the other thing. Like, when Triple H came back to open January of 2002, and you mentioned, like, you know, the moment and the reaction he got when he like made his return. And I mean, Jim Ross and JR on commentary talking about like that's the loudest they've ever heard of building. How like the crowd was deafening for like 5 straight minutes during Triple H's entrance. Like after that moment, you Chris Jericho. Like, with all due respect, he did beat Rock and Austin the same night, but this isn't Rock or Austin. This is Chris Jericho. So you knew Triple H was going to walk in WrestleMania, beat him. So there wasn't that you know, inherent investment there, you know?
Right, right. And that's part of it, too, is Chris Jericho, he beat Rock and Austin. And we didn't really talk about this, but Chris Jericho was not perceived to be on Rock and Austin's level going into that match that night when he won the Undisputed title. I don't know what it was, like why they decided to go with that. I guess mainly because Triple H was hurt. I guarantee if Triple H had been healthy, that would have been his moment. But, you know, they had to go with Jericho, is what it is.
Yeah.
But it's just like, when you look at it, I believe the 4 guys involved in that tournament that night was Jericho, Kurt Angle, Rock and Austin.
Yep.
So, if you ask me that, you go, which one is not like the other? I'm going to tell you Chris Jericho. At that point in time, Kurt Angle was already a main event guy, established WWE champion, one of the best in the business. Rock and Austin were Rock and Austin, don't even need to say it. And then Jericho was this mid-carder, you know. I mean, that just was what he was. He was just a mid-carder at that time, and he beats Rock and Austin. And even after he won, it was like, okay, it's still Chris Jericho. Like, he's still not quite on those guys' levels, even though he's walking around with both belts. He's got Stephanie McMahon next to him, and it's no disrespect to him. And then Triple H comes back. It's like, yeah, this guy, one of the faces of the Attitude Era, face of DX. Guys had just iconic rivalry after iconic rivalry with Rock, Austin, etc. Yeah, you know Jericho's going to put him over. And then they had a good match, too. After WrestleMania, they had a good Hell in a Cell match. And I believe they had another match. I don't know how many it was, but they had 2 matches after WrestleMania that were both really good. One inside of Hell in a Cell. Unfortunately, just WrestleMania just didn't work.
Yeah, it just didn't click. I mean, and also, you talk about that whole like Jericho, one of them's not like the other type thing. It's just a testament to the talent at the time,
right?
Like they built up such great stars, and then the writing was so good that Rock, Austin, Kurt Angle, like these are legitimate, like, you know, first ballot Hall of Famers, just, you know, legends of professional wrestling, you know, greatest of all time caliber wrestlers, you know. So Jericho being in that position as like kind of like the 4th guy. I mean, you go on kind of saying that out of the 4 of them, it's like, oh yeah, Jericho's there as well, you know. Like, so Jericho winning, it was an awesome moment for him, a moment that really underpins his whole career. Like, that's like a moment that if Jericho retired in 2002, he's still got a great career off the back of that right there. Like, that's a moment which you can retire on, and it's like, I did that. You know, I won, you know? Yeah, like, it was an incredible moment, but then really, I mean, in totality, held the belt 3.5 months or 3 months, dropped it to Triple H. They did the rematches. That match with Jericho and Triple H inside Hell in a Cell, I believe, at Judgment Day, from memory, like that, one of the most underrated matches ever. That never gets mentioned, and it was better than the Mania match. It was really damn good, like, just generally. So, yeah, I mean, that was O2 Jericho. I think really the next big thing to talk about with Jericho, Kevin, unless you want to add in something else about O2.
Yeah, I mean, O2. What did he do in O2? I mean, he was in the King of the Ring. You know, he was in the first Elimination Chamber match too, I believe.
Yes. I mean, that's a cool little thing, because like the Elimination Chamber was like a big deal. You know, they kind of killed it. It was, as we've talked about in past Elite Heats, but at the time that was like oh my god. I mean, Jericho is a part of this first time ever, and it felt cool. It felt good. You know.
Oh, actually, there's one big thing we're missing from O2.
Yeah.
He was John Cena's first feud ever on the main roster. Yeah, John Cena debuted. He slapped Kurt Angle, but his first rivalry was with Chris Jericho. You know, they had a pay-per-view match at Vengeance. Like, that's just, I mean, it's almost been forgotten about all these years later. You know, you all remember the moment where Cena slapped Jericho, and it was one of the hardest slaps you'll ever find on WWE TV. I mean, it's crazy. You know, it's insane what Jericho's done. And that's just another little thing to add to his resume, having John Cena's first rivalry.
Yeah, it's just all these things that Jericho has just done along the way. And it's not like with nowadays where like, WWE writes it so that a certain wrestler, Charlotte Flair, does all this stuff and they try and tout it. And it's like, this feels so like inorganic and unorganic. Like with Jericho, this kind of stuff, you look back, in hindsight, as we're doing with this bio now, and there's reverence to it. It's like, oh damn, he did that and that. He did that as well. What a career. Like, that's what you get with Jericho. You know, it wasn't forced at all. We're going to have him feud with Cena. It's going to be something that we're going to flex for decades on end. Like, no, it's something he did, which is pretty cool to look back on, you know? Like,
absolutely. Yeah, and that's probably more of a testament to the fact that WWE really didn't have big plans for Cena. It was like, oh yeah, we'll have a feud with Jericho, and then we'll cut him come Christmas cuts in 2002. You know, whatever. But, it just ends up working out that way. I guarantee if WWE, like if that was Randy Orton in 2002, and Randy Orton's first ever feud was with Jericho, we'd still be hearing about that today because of the agenda of WWE. Like, we get reminded of it over and over. Oh, Randy Orton slapped Chris Jericho on an episode of SmackDown back in 2002. I guess it just comes down to agendas, really.
Yeah, I mean, realistically. So there's that. Then we transition into, realistically, what Chris Jericho has called his favorite WrestleMania match of all time, and I dare say undoubtedly his best WrestleMania match of all time. Jericho and Shawn at WrestleMania 19, Kevin. Walk me through this one.
Classic match. If for whatever reason, if you haven't seen it, pause this podcast right now and go watch it, and then come back. Because, like, if you haven't seen that match, you're missing out big time. It's one of the best matches you'll ever see. And it's really, there's nothing to it from a performance perspective. It's not two guys doing 100 flips. It's just basic psychology, good storytelling, and they ended up having a really good match. The story was simple, believable, realistic. The story going in is that Jericho looked up to Shawn Michaels, and he was out to prove that he was on Shawn Michaels' level. It's kind of one of those things, student becomes a peer. And that's kind of what it was. It was just, what can I say? It was great. I remember that vignette where Chris Jericho, he's like, I wanted to be like you, Shawn. And then I met you, and you were, then I met you, and I got to work with you. And then at the end, Shawn wins. Jericho turns on Shawn, low blows him, and it's perfect. That's storytelling and wrestling 101 right there.
Absolutely. And like one of the things Jericho's talked about is like this whole match, like they thought of the match. So literally they do the build, whatnot. Jericho is literally in some random sports store one day, and he has this coming to Jesus moment, and literally like everything just becomes clear to him. He rushes up to the counter and goes like, give a pen and paper, and he gets given like the back of a receipt, and he writes down the whole lot, like the whole ending of this match, like the whole last like 5 or so minutes. It's like almost like move for move, And so he writes that down. And then Shawn Michaels, when Jericho sees him at the rehearsal, like a couple days, like a week later or whenever, Shawn Michaels is like, oh, well, I thought of the first half of the match. Like, I've got the start of the match. So they meshed it together. The rehearsal was done in 10 minutes. And then they show up at Safeco Field for WrestleMania 19, and magic's made. The match was magic. It was just insane. Like, absolutely. A 5-star match, if ever there was one. Storytelling, insane. Moves, perfect with psychology, just excellent. Yeah,
and it wasn't even the best match that Jericho and Shawn have had. They went on to have better matches a few years later, which we're going to talk about. But yeah, I mean, and then I think Jericho kind of started going down a downward slope after this feud with Shawn. It was just kind of like he got lost in the shuffle because WWE's talent roster was so massive at this point in time.
Exactly that. You know?
Yeah, you have Goldberg coming in. You know, you've got Triple H running around in the reign of terror, quote unquote. You got guys like RVD, Kane, just Booker T, so much talent, just a ridiculous amount of talent, right? And it feels like Jericho's just kind of there. He's not really doing a whole lot. Like, he's in another Elimination Chamber match, an iconic moment where Goldberg spears him through one of the chamber pods. But other than that, what really happened in 03? Like, he feuded with Christian. He had this really good feud with Christian and Trish Stratus that gets looked on with rose-colored glasses nowadays. People are like, wow, this was a great feud. Oh, they had great matches, great work rate. Yeah, it was good, but it wasn't Rock and Austin. You know,
it was an afterthought. It was there. You know, like no one was tuning into Raw to see what Chris Jericho and Christian were doing. It was just a part of the show. You know, and that's kind of what kind of summed up Jericho until he left in 05, really. It's just Jericho was a guy on the show, which, as we've talked about, Jericho's ambition to be something greater than himself, that bothered him. You know, so when he's having these, when he's kind of just in the Raw mid-card, like the main events, I don't know, Triple H versus Goldberg in a 3-month world title program. Fair. Jericho is in the undercard having a feud with, I mean, like, you name him, Kevin. Like, Jericho had feuds, you know, having matches with RVD, or he was involved with something like Lance Storm.
Benjamin, or like Christian, primarily for the better part of 0304. And it was a good storyline. The storyline with Christian and him was good. It was a romantic storyline over the love of Trish Stratus. And it was damn good TV, but it wasn't Shawn versus Brett. It wasn't that. It was just good. It was a really good part of the show, a good part of the undercard. You know, it was good. Whatever Jericho was doing was just good. Not great, not bad, just good.
Yeah, really that sums up, you know, the rest of Jericho's stuff until he left in 05, to be honest, because, like, I mean, as I kind of just said there, the dude wanted to do something bigger than himself. He'd become undisputed champion. He beat Rock and Austin the same night. He'd main event at WrestleMania 18. He'd done the match with Michaels at 19. When you go from that to random mid-card stuff against Shelton Benjamins and Christians, that stuff's not bad. Like, that stuff, as you say, was good. But it's just like you go from like a 10 out of 10, oh my God, this is what my career's built up to type of, you know, storyline and moment, to like a 6 out of 10. Oh yeah, it's good, but nothing people are really going to love in hindsight. It's like, okay, where to from here? And unless there's anything else you really want to say about Jericho in 03 to the first half of 05, Kevin.
I mean, really the only thing to say is that
Money in the Bank?
Yeah, he was involved in Money in the Bank, but like really what I would say is Jericho was kind of like a utility man. When WWE needed him, they could put him in the main event, he'll deliver. You know, if they wanted to put him in there, have a random pay-per-view, high-quality match with Shawn Michaels, okay, do it. You want to put him in there, have John Cena defend the belt against him for 2-3 months at a time in the summer of 05? Do it. It's Chris Jericho. People would get behind it. He's
also,
a believable, incredible opponent for Cena.
Would you say a modern-day equivalent of that is AJ Styles?
Yes. Yeah, I would say that's a very fair comparison. Absolutely. AJ is the ultimate utility man, and that's a lot of what Jericho has been throughout his whole career.
Yeah, because you were given that description there. Apologies to cut you off. Feel free to go on once I finish here. But no, like, look, you're giving that description. I'm just thinking to myself, that's legit what AJ is right now. You know, like, he's not like he came into the company within the first, you know, from about year 1 to year 3 for AJ, he was, you know, consistently world champion, world title, main event, and then kind of cooled off a bit. He'll bob up for a world title match every now and then, like a TLC 2020 versus Drew McIntyre, for example. But just generally speaking, mid-card stuff, that kind of thing, secondary programs, that's what AJ Styles has done a lot in the past, like 2 years especially. that's essentially what Jericho's like second half of 03 to first half of 05 was, really.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about AJ Styles too later on in this podcast. That just shows the longevity and the relevancy of Jericho. Just he's been around for so many guys. He's feuded with so many guys. He's been around. But yeah, so I mean he does this rivalry with Cena, and basically what happens was he loses to Jericho at a couple pay-per-views, and then on August 22nd, Jericho faces Cena in a You're Fired match on Raw, and Jericho loses, and that's it. Jericho gets escorted out by security, and we don't see him for about 2 years after this point. And he went on, he did his Fozzy stuff, he did his rock music, and yeah, then he randomly shows back up. I think we can talk about this now. He randomly shows up on
I want to really quickly just add into a little bit of stuff about his his 05 departure. Literally, I mean, he explained that on the Austin interview. Essentially, when he left, he had this whole I forget exactly where he saw this and what the motivation was, but he wanted the last visual of Chris Jericho on WWE programming to be a comedic one of Jericho kicking and screaming with 6 guys carrying him out, and Jericho was having a temper tantrum. That was the visual he had in mind, and they executed that flawlessly. He lost the You're Fired match. Bischoff fired him. Jericho was carried out, and then from then on, Jericho he was content for at least a year and a bit. Jericho had no real desire to jump back in the ring, to lace the boots back up, pal. He didn't have that. Jericho was content with the 15-year career he'd had. And literally, I want to make this point now. This would be a good one for the podcast, Kevin. If Jericho's career ended on August 22nd, 2005, and he just never continued, it's still a Hall of Fame career. That's the crazy part of it.
Absolutely. And he'd be remembered a lot like Punk, I think, if that had happened. People would look at it and just be like, oh, Jericho could have done more. I want to see him back. I want to see Jericho back. I want to see Jericho versus whoever, some of the new guys. Jericho versus Sheamus versus Randy Orton. I need to see Jericho versus Punk. that would have been the mindset in 2010-11 if Jericho had never came back,
Hell yeah, because you'd have these people being the entitled tweets on Twitter, give me this, or I need this, and there's a picture of Jericho and there's a picture of Wade Barrett, that's the kind of stuff which you'd get. So in that regard, yeah, Jericho left in 05. 06, he just has no thought or desire for wrestling. Then in 07, he sees Cena and Shawn Michaels having the WrestleMania main event, and he thinks to himself, I've worked with Michaels, I've worked with Cena, I work well with both of them. I'm getting some passion back. This is more exciting to me. So he comes back, Kevin. Over to you. Talk us through his 07 comeback, pal.
Yeah, well, it was the philosophy, of I'll step away. Absence only grows the heart fonder, the old saying. And he shows up. It's kind of basically pretty similar to his debut, where they're doing a countdown, and he shows up in the middle of Randy Orton cutting a promo on Raw. Maybe, you compare that to Rock cutting a promo back in 1999. Fast forward 8 years, it's Randy Orton in the middle of the ring. Maybe not the same quality of segment, but, it's what it is. And Jericho came back as a babyface. I don't think he's best suited as a babyface. I think he's better suited as a heel. And it felt like he was just another guy, in my opinion, from my perspective, watching wrestling at that point. Because I wasn't a big Jericho fan as a kid. And seeing him come back against Randy Orton, I was like, skippable. You can miss me with this right now. I'm not really interested. Well, what do you have to say about his return? What kind of insight do you have on it?
I mean, essentially, the thing with Jericho's return, it was kind of evident from the 08 stuff with Shawn Michaels, is that Jericho was supposed to be a heel, he comes back as a babyface, disrupts the evil menace Randy Orton, and it's okay, It
was so cheesy, too. It's this passing of the torch moment. You have somebody running with a torch, and Jericho just clotheslines that guy, and he's just doing his pose as Randy Orton's pretending to freak out after, he just got back from a night of hookers and cocaine. It's it just wasn't the same. It didn't hit the same. And then Jericho quickly realized that, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And he was like, yeah, I can't do this. I can't be a babyface. I'm just another guy. He's beating Santino Marella to debut his Codebreaker finish. Oh, pal, that's Hall of Fame stuff right there. Chris Jericho versus Santino Marella. Ooh, oh, man, let me tell you, that crispness of that Codebreaker on that match between Chris Jericho and Santino Marella. Maybe the most crisp Codebreaker in the history of Codebreakers, in my mind. But, he wins the IC title from Jeff Hardy. Like, he's just, again, back in the mid-card picture. You know, what did he do at WrestleMania 2008? He was in the Money in the Bank ladder match, I believe.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And that was the thing. That was exactly kind of building the point I made a moment ago. It's like Jericho always wanted to do something bigger, something better, reinvent. What can I bring of value? So Jericho comes back, and he's literally in the same spot as he was when he left. He was a utility guy. You could throw him like a bone and give him a little main event program for a month or two, but it wasn't like he was like the guy they were putting stock into. He was just a guy, not like the guy. So in that regard, Jericho, he has the IC title thing. There's the Money in the Bank thing at WrestleMania 24. And then he goes and does what, Kevin? Walk us through that. Or like, what happens next in the legacy of Y2J, pal?
I would say in WWE, I would say this is Jericho's best rivalry. This 2008-2009 rivalry with Shawn Michaels that started in the summer of 2008. There's a couple famous segments here in a row that happened on Raw. You have Jericho, you know, he puts Shawn Michaels through the monitor on an episode of the highlight reel. And Shawn is like, oh, I can't see, I'm blind, got glass in my eye. And then he comes around, we got blind Shawn Michaels, and we have Shawn Michaels' wife is out there, like, how could you do this to my husband? And Jericho, sure enough, he accidentally punches Shawn Michaels' wife for real in the face. Gives her a black eye. Accidentally, yes, accidentally. He accidentally punched her for real. You know, he wasn't supposed to. Obviously, it was a big mistake. But it ended up making the storyline even more personal, right? Like, I mean, you go with it. Those two guys were so great that they went with it. They were like, yeah, Shawn, you have these moments now, like in the weeks after that, where Shawn is just like, you hurt my wife. How dare you? You never touch another man's wife. And it made for really good TV. This was me now as a kid. I'm like, wow, this is good. I want to see the heel Jericho get his ass kicked. I want to see Shawn Michaels beat him up. And it was Jericho debuting a new layer to his ever-evolving character. He's coming out in a suit. He's talking very low, so you have to listen to everything he's saying. He's making good points. He's getting in fans' faces. Like, there's one segment where he's screaming at an old man, calling him grandpa. You know, saying, what are you going to do? You going to hit me, grandpa? This era of Jericho, in my mind, or in my personal preference, it's my favorite era of Jericho. From like 08 to 2009, early 2010. Just the heel stuff he did. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's hard to disagree with that. Like, I mean, you just look at Jericho all round as just the pro wrestler. He'd figured out like another thing. You know, this was Jericho. He'd been studying movies. He'd been watching other, you know, forms of theater, other like acting. And that's another one of the things that makes Jericho so great. He's always looking around at anything that could be an idea that he could get over. Anything that could, you know, be thought of in the same vein as like the Jericho character. Like, what could Jericho use to reinvent himself? And this whole thing of Jericho being just like an evil heel, wearing the suit, like, you know, dark kind of clothing, you know, very kind of stone-faced, cold, calculated, you know, being remorseless towards Shawn Michaels, really showing it off by, as you say, punching Shawn's wife, putting him through, you know, the screen on the highlight reel, all this kind of stuff. It's stuff that you remember. Like these are heel actions that stand out. It's not just like, oh, well, he randomly attacked him after a 10-minute match on Raw. Okay. Like we see literally every match nowadays, you know, Kevin. It's like, this was something that was so different, and the two people involved were so great at professional wrestling that the storytelling in these matches they had with Shawn and Jericho, my God, Kevin, my God.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Really great stuff. You know, you have like, it was a really long feud. This was like true long-term storytelling. It wasn't like, you know, Seth Rollins and Rey Mysterio, where it's like Bruce Pritchard trying to outdo the ridiculous segment that he wrote the week before. You know, he's having Seth Rollins read Buddy Murphy's DMs on live TV. It was like, this feud started in like May, and Jericho was mad that Shawn Michaels retired Chris Jericho, one of his idols. Good story. There's definitely some meat on the bone there. And then he accidentally punches Shawn's wife, and then you got a whole other element to the story. And they're having no-holds-bars matches. They're having ladder matches. That ladder match they had was just, I mean, bro, that ladder match was unbelievable. I believe it was at No Mercy. Just yes. one of the best matches of 08. One of the best ladder matches of all time for the World Heavyweight title. It was so good.
Well, like, one of the good things about that match as well, which I found this good, so on Tough Enough in, I believe it was 15, when they were having, like, they had Jericho as like a special appearance. Like, one episode, Jericho was like a special contributor, coach or whatever. And literally what they do is they have Jericho showing the tough enough trainees and tough enough contestants this match against Shawn Michaels and No Mercy, this ladder match, is one of these matches which you show people who are aspiring to be a wrestler as to how to do it. Because in that match, I'm 99% sure Jericho had like a tooth knocked out because the ladder hit him in the mouth. And then for one, that shows you how to be professional, push through adversity, deal with a bad situation and make it amazing, as well as the storytelling involved. The whole months and months of Jericho and Shawn feuding, they culminated it. Every move made sense. They used the ladder strategically. It wasn't just, oh, let's have Jericho do a 750-degree flip off the ladder because, oh, wow, that looks cool. Like, no, they used the ladder logically. The match, the ending was really good. Like, everything about this match is what you're going to show a trainee wrestler, Kevin. Like, it's
Absolutely.
Just great.
Yeah, this is one of those matches that if you have aspirations of being a pro wrestler, watch the series of matches that Shawn and Jericho had in 2008. The unsanctioned match at Unforgiven, the ladder match at No Mercy. Like, both of those matches were better than the match they had at WrestleMania 19, in my mind. You know, and then, like, the hits just kept coming. From then, he's feuding with Mickey Rourke in a high-profile feud. Like, it sounds silly when you say it, 12, 13 years later. But at the time, in 2009, Chris Jericho feuding with Mickey Rourke, going on CNN, telling Mickey Rourke he's going to punch him in the face. That was that publicity that WWE loves and WWE thrives on, that mainstream publicity. You know, it was, you know, it resulted in a 3-on-1 Legends match at WrestleMania 25 that was kind of silly with Piper, Steamboat, you know, Ric Flair being out there, Jimmy Snuka. It was silly because Mickey Rourke ended up being too scared of getting in the ring and didn't want to injure himself and, you know, risk his career, which I get. But, you know, at the time, it was still a pretty good rivalry. And it showed that Jericho, at that point in 2009, Jericho was in goodwill with Vince McMahon. And he was going to be given that priority treatment, that main event treatment.
Well, yeah, like one of the things you talk about there is Jericho uses that character of his, that like serious heel character, who just had this amazing feud with Shawn Michaels. He took that and, you know, went to other forms of media and took that into a mainstream sense. The Mickey Rourke stuff. He's on CNN. He's on these like late night talk shows. He's cutting these promos about Mickey Rourke and just doing this stuff to like really, you know, get himself over. I mean, Vince Russo, he defines over so well. Over is literally the airport test. When Chris Jericho is walking through the airport in a suit with the big gold belt, regardless if you know wrestling or not, you're gonna look at him and go, "That's somebody." That isn't just the regular everyday guy. Like, that guy is legit. Like, he doesn't have to be 6'8", 350 pounds, snorting steroids to be some, you know, larger than life star. And that's what Jericho really did with the Mickey Rourke stuff, with, you know, this storyline he had with like the Legends and whatnot coming out in 2008. This was Jericho's best run, in my opinion, at least. Like, this was Jericho reinventing himself to the highest degree, something that clicked, it worked, it fit him. Just great all around, Kevin.
Absolutely. I think it's by far Jericho's best run, in my mind. You know, I mean, like, maybe you could talk about his run in 01-02, which was great too. You know, late 01, most of 2002, great run. But what he was doing in late 09 was just another level.
What was his character, you know? Like, this 08 run just hit different.
Yeah, his character in 01-02 was a guy that called Stephanie McMahon a slut. You know, like, that's really what it was. It's not, you know, not making stuff up. Like, that's just, he just came out and said funny stuff. He was just a guy. He's kind of like he was kind of like the first cool heel, I guess you could say, in like 01-02, that was funny and comedic, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be tempted to say The Rock, but really Rock wasn't like the cool type heel. I mean, he was a kind of a cool face, but like, just generally speaking, like, yeah, Jericho was a cool like heel.
Yeah.
And then I guess, I mean, one thing we can transition into now, I mean, you take that kind of the detestable, maniacal heel Jericho, he gets into a feud with Rey Mysterio over the IC title and makes the IC title feel like the most important belt in the company, because the WWE title is it's Triple H and Randy Orton pissing around at every pay-per-view having a 30-minute match that no one cares about. Meanwhile, you got Jericho and Mysterio having like this personal, hate-filled storyline for the IC title. It was glorious.
Oh, it was good. It was such a good rivalry. This was the first time that Rey Mysterio had been unmasked on WWE TV. A very memorable moment when Jericho pulls the mask off of Rey Mysterio at Extreme Rules and wins the belt. I mean, you know, it was good stuff. And then it led to, you know, a match for his title match at Backlash. Really good Intercontinental title feud for Jericho. And yeah, he was in the mid-card. Yeah. but he was doing more than just good stuff, like what he was doing with Christian in '04. This was great stuff. A lot of people preferred this than, like you said, watching Triple H and Randy Orton have a match after Randy Orton had, he's coming back from a night of cocaine and partying. Nobody really wanted to watch that as Randy Orton's doing like his 3-4 moves of doom. But then, you get to this point in '09, he wins the tag team titles with Edge. Edge gets hurt, and then we get Jericho. But what are your thoughts on Jericho? Anything you got about this impromptu tag team between Big Show and Chris Jericho?
Thrown together. I mean, the name says it, Jericho. Like, I wonder how long that took to come up with, Kevin. If it took more than 3 minutes, I'd be surprised.
The theme song was terrible, too. Good God.
Oh, it started this trend of WWE getting really lazy with theme songs, where they just literally go, okay, what can we do? We'll throw the songs together and that'll be that. It wasn't good to listen to. It was just, you've got a mashup of Break the Walls Down and where's the Big Show? It's just, what is this crap, Kevin?
Yeah, what am I watching? Yeah, I know.
It's just PG WWE. And it's '09, you hit towards 2010, and then Jericho, he's in the Elimination Chamber for the World Heavyweight title. Undertaker's going in World Champion. Shawn screws Taker. They're setting up Wrestlemania 26. Jericho is the right place at the right time, crawls over, pins Mark Calloway, 1, 2, 3. Jericho becomes World Heavyweight Champion again, Kevin. You love to see it.
Yeah, you love to see it. And it ended up in, leading into a pretty good rivalry. Edge had just won the 2010 Royal Rumble. Pretty good rivalry between Jericho and Edge, two of Canada's greatest exports for the wrestling business. And they had a match at WrestleMania 26. I would say, unfortunately, due to both guys' resume, just massive resumes, it's kind of one of their more forgotten moments. I don't really hear people talk about how great this Jericho Edge match was from WrestleMania 26. That's just me, though.
Well, it goes back to it was literally the same thing as WrestleMania 18. It's like, what do you think of when you think WrestleMania 26, Kevin? You're going to think of Taker versus Shawn. That's like the main thing.
Absolutely.
And then outside of that, I mean, I think Cena Batista, yep. And then that's Jericho Edge up there. And that's literally about it. That's Mania 26. It's like the third match you think of. It was good, but it wasn't like, oh my God, what a classic. That is the match. So, yeah, good but not godly. I think that's the best way of putting it.
Right, yeah. And I would say, after WrestleMania 26, he didn't really do a whole lot. Edge won the world title, or Jack Swagger won the title from him, cashing in. And then he really didn't do much. Like, he's, feuding with Nexus, stuff like that. He's a part of the infamous storyline where John Cena buried the Nexus. I got a video dropping about that on my channel. You've probably already seen that by the time you're listening to this podcast, but it'll be out. Check it out. And yeah, I mean, that's really it from 2010, 2011. He returns randomly. Anything you want to add in 2010 before we go back to 2011?
Well, realistically, yeah, he goes back to being what he was in like 04 and 05. He's just kind of there. Jericho's on the roster. It's awesome to have Jericho. He can help put over this Nexus faction, which Cena's going to eventually just beat by himself. But yeah, Jericho was just kind of there. And so then he eventually kind of departs after September. He goes off to do stuff with Fozzy for the next year and a bit. He's doing music. And then the vignettes start to play again, Vignettes start, Kevin. And what that means with Chris Jericho.
Yeah, Y2J is back, baby. Yeah, so he comes back in 2011, just in time for WrestleMania 28, pal. And, CM Punk, it's looking like CM Punk is the odd man out. We got Cena Rock. We got Triple H Taker. But what do you know? Y2J, he saves us again. First, he saves us from Randy Orton's terrible title reign in 07. And then here, he saves CM Punk's spot on the card. Because God only knows if Chris Jericho did not come back, what CM Punk would have been doing as WWE champion. Oh,
God forbid.
like, speculate for a second here. CM Punk realistically could have had a WWE title match versus The Miz at WrestleMania 28. If Jericho did not come back.
Oh, hell yeah. Well, you look at Punk's title reign prior to Jericho, he won the title from Alberto Del Rio at Survivor Series. TLC was Punk versus Alberto Del Rio versus the Maz. Royal Rumble was Punk versus Dolph Ziggler. And then John Laurinaitis was a referee. And then in the Elimination Chamber, it was Punk and Kofi Kingston and Ziggler. I'm what is this, dude? So Jericho comes in, literally makes CM Punk's title reign go from oh, it's Phil Brooks beating a bunch of mid-carders who are no more than that, to, oh, okay, Punk and Jericho, they're feuding in this personal storyline about like alcoholism and Punk's family, and Jericho's calling Punk a fraud, Jericho's calling out Punk's sister his father. Like, oh wow, like this is, wow, okay, legit. Like I remember that. Like I remember I was legit, I think 9 at this point. I'm watching this thinking, like I'm a diehard Punk fan. Punk's my favorite wrestler. I'm watching Punk take the sobriety test, and he's like stumbling, and he can't walk the straight line. I'm like, oh my god, I was like taking it so personally. So it was really good in that regard. Like childhood me was infatuated with this. Yeah,
it's safe to say that this feud was very personal there, John.
Very personal. And the WrestleMania 28, yes, it was only the third match you think of. You think of once in a lifetime and end of an era before this. But at the same time, this was like pretty good. It's a really good third best match at WrestleMania. And then the next pay-per-view, they did the Chicago Street Fight. I don't know your thoughts on this. Personally, I loved it. I thought they incorporated the storyline really damn well.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I did. I don't remember much about the Chicago Street Fight. I do remember pretty much the whole build going up to WrestleMania, especially when Jericho poured alcohol on Punk. I was like, wow, that is very PG there, John. But I mean, it's one of my favorite storylines involving Punk and Jericho. I know for you as well. The storyline was just, for me, really good. It was like, yeah, Rock and Cena was the big time story. Yeah, Triple H and Taker, they were having this end of an era match. But for me, I was more interested in Punk and Jericho, really. Like, aside, of course, Cena and Rock, but I was just more interested in Punk and Jericho than like Triple H and Taker, watching them wrestle for a third time. And it turned out to be great. No disparagement meant. But yeah, then the Chicago Street Fight, it was good. It's a good PG street fight. Well, one of the best, I would say.
Yeah, legit. And then, I mean, coming out of that, like, Jericho, it's the same things we mentioned before. It's like he's not in like the world title scene, but he's involved in like various different things. I mean, like from this time period, I remember he was just a random guy involved in Sheamus's world title program. Like he goes from Extreme Rules, the big personal Chicago Street Fight with Punk, where you've got Punk punching Jericho in front of Punk's sisters, and the front row is all Punk's family, and Jericho's getting punched in the head and loses the match. And then the next pay-per-view, he's just randomly involved in this fatal four-way match with Del Rio, Randy Orton, and Sheamus. They just throw them all together in the ring and say, here's the world title, have a match. Okay. And then there was the incident where Jericho kicked a Brazilian flag infamously. Do you remember much from this? Like, I remember at the time,
yes.
This was like all over the dirt sheets. Jericho was like shamed for this act with the
This was the first time many times that Jericho got canceled.
Jesus Christ. I mean, there's that. And then eventually, he was involved in the ex-world champions.
You know what I remember? Let me tell you what I remember. Mainly from 2012 post-Punk was that terrible feud he had with Dolph Ziggler. Like this, oh my god!
Yes.
Like I remember Jericho in a Dolph Ziggler shirt with a mirror, like putting hairspray in his hair, and I'm just like, bro, what am I watching right now? Why is the first ever undisputed champion wearing a bright pink Dolph Ziggler shirt, spraying hairspray in his hair on live TV? Like oh my god.
Jesus
I'm glad WWE doesn't mention that. I'm glad they've given that one the old Benoit treatment and whitewashed it from history.
Legit, like, my god, like SummerSlam 2012. I remember I had the DVD of SummerSlam 2012. I watched that show way too much, and legit I opened the show, Jericho and Ziggler, and I remember even as like a 9-year-old, I'm like, why are they fighting? Like, why should I care?
Wasn't it over the briefcase? Like, didn't Jericho win the briefcase at SummerSlam, and then Ziggler just beat him up for it the next night and took the briefcase back?
Something like that. It was like Jericho beat him at SummerSlam, just I think regularly. It might have been a roll-up pin from memory, and then the next night Ziggler just beat him, and it's like, okay, 50-50 booking, why should I care? And then from there, Jericho just got written off TV, literally like from there.
Yeah, so, I'm pretty sure Ziggler beat him up so bad that was the end of Jericho's run. It was like, oh, this tough guy that, has a long blonde ponytail, this tough guy just beat up Jericho, and now Jericho's gone for like 7 months.
And then in fairness, it kind of worked out pretty good because like Jericho, he was away for like 5 months, and then literally Ziggler's number 1 entering the Rumble, and then number 2 is Jericho, and it was a surprise entry. The crowd went nuts. One of the better surprise like moments at the Rumble. Like the Rumbles had a couple of really good ones over the years, but this one really sick. And Jericho comes out number 2. Crowd goes crazy. People genuinely thought he'd win this. Obviously Cena was like the overwhelming favorite, but Jericho was like, oh, well, he could well win.
He should have won. He should have won. Honestly, honestly, what was the world title match at WrestleMania 29?
Cena and Rock, because they apparently needed the world title.
No, the big gold belt. It was Swagger.
Del Rio versus Jack Swagger in a We the People storyline.
Yeah, you just throw Jericho in there, give that match some entertainment. Instead, we got the infamous Fandango storyline, where Jericho literally for 4 weeks straight on the road to WrestleMania, all he did was do backstage interviews with Renee Young, just going Fandoodle, Fandingo, Fandingadong. Fan this, fan that. Oh, where's my movie tickets, Fandango? And then you have Fandango come up and be like, Chris, I told you, it is Fandango. And Jericho would be like, huh, what? What'd you say? Got my movie tickets?
Whoa.
Oh my God. This was... Chris Jericho came back. He returned to WWE from doing, heavy metal bands, heavy metal concerts, going crazy. And then he sits down with Vince McMahon one day, and Vince is like, here, pal, at WrestleMania, you're going to lose to Fandango. And Jericho's like, why did I come back? Can I just leave? Just release me. But then, if he does that, he'll never be welcome back. So he puts over Fandango. I'm going to stop before I keep going on. Go ahead.
It's just like at the time, Fandango was like the most over mid-card thing. But there was no main event potential there. You aren't gonna make Johnny Curtis feud with John Cena for the WWE title, because a bunch of Eurosmarks in Britain did the Fandango, because a bunch of them did that. Vince is like, oh, damn it, Chris, you're gonna do the job to Johnny Curtis at WrestleMania.
They did the Fandango thing at a soccer game, right, or something. And it was like a sports center.
Something like that. It was another one of these yes movement. Here's a fun chant for the crowd to do, but the wrestler themselves, they're not doing the chant because they like the wrestler. They're doing the chant because it's an easy chant to do. It's the exact same thing. So you've got Chris Jericho for literally 3 weeks doing interviews with Renee Young going, Fandingo, Fandoodle, Dingity Dingo, Fandoodle. And then, you can imagine some writer is probably like 45-year-old man who probably drinks 9 coffees a day, addicted to caffeine. Probably his wife's left him. He's probably miserable. He's literally writing this script going, Fan Doodle, Fan Dingo. And they're probably just like, this is so good. Get out of here, dude. This whole thing, Jericho's losing the Fandango at WrestleMania. And it's like, Jericho lost to him, but Fandango was still buried. It's hard to explain how that works, but somehow that's how it worked.
It's the biggest stain. I would say the biggest stain on Jericho's legacy, right? When you think about his overall legacy, it's really the one oh my God, wow, just terrible thing. He's had his incidents like the Brazilian flag thing that we covered, and other incidents that we're going to cover later on. But in terms of wrestling, this is the one that's wow. Oof. How did this happen?
There's so many things they could have done. Legit, WrestleMania 29, it was essentially WrestleMania 28 as far as the card, but they just made the whole undercard even worse, and the main events didn't deliver as much. So legit, what you could have done, potentially, I don't know about this, Kevin, you bring Jericho back, he's the number 2 entrant in the Rumble, it's oh my God, Jericho's back, wow, this is cool. You could have had either, you mentioned him potentially having a World Heavyweight Big Gold Belt match, could have done that, or you could have had Punk be a part of Cena and Rock. You could have done a triple threat main event. You could have done Jericho versus, I don't know, The Undertaker maybe. You could have built that up and had Jericho be like, Mark Calloway, I've done a lot of things in my career, but I've never taken you on. I think I've been around for 15 years. You've been the standard. I need a new challenge. I'm going to beat you at WrestleMania. And you could have built it up. And you could have had people genuinely thinking, Jericho can beat this guy. Well, you could have done that, but no, instead, we're going to have Jericho saying, Fandoodle, Fandingo, Fan Yabba-Dabba-Doo, and then he just loses to this guy, Johnny Curtis, at WrestleMania in a 9-minute match with a roll-up, which looks so botched. Jericho, he's squirming in the roll-up, and it's just dude, this is pathetic. This is Chris Jericho. This is the guy who 5 years ago was punching Shawn Michaels' wife and was calling out Mickey Rourke on CNN. And now he's legit losing to Johnny Curtis, a guy who a month after this was in a feud with, like, Lay Cool. You know, like, get out of here with this crap, dude. Just terrible.
Yeah,
you know?
It was bad. He went from doing holding a mirror, putting hairspray in his hair against Dolph Ziggler to this. It was like just two bad things in a row. But then you know what they did, pal? They put him in there with the old CM Punk again. CM Punk was like, you know what, Vince, I'm out. You didn't let me main event WrestleMania 29. I'm leaving. And Vince says, I can't let you do that, pal. You gotta wrestle Chris in your hometown. So there we go. We get Punk and Jericho at Payback again, twice in a row. Twice in a lifetime there, John. And what is there to say about this Payback match of 2013? I'll let you talk about it because you're more of a Punk fan than I am.
Yeah, this was the whole thing where, like, Punk was like starting to get annoyed because he'd been WWE champion for 14 months, loses the belt to The Rock. He's like, oh, I'm losing the belt to a part-time. I should have lost the belt at WrestleMania. And then Punk loses the Undertaker at WrestleMania, and he's like, Vince, I need a break. I need to have the surgery. I did the spot at WrestleMania. I did the big dive off the top rope, elbow through the table to Taker, and his whole hip's destroyed. So Punk, he's taking his, had his surgery. He has his, 2 months off, and then he gets a call from Vince, and Vince is like, oh, damn it, Phil. We need you for Payback. Payback's in Chicago. We need to sell tickets, so we're going to have you come back and have a great match with Chris Jericho. And Punk, literally, as he said it on infamously in podcasts, he loves Chris Jericho to death, but literally, why? Kevin's like, what about this match does it mean anything? It's like, okay, he's having a match with Jericho. And just like that, Punk was back in the company. He was disgruntled, unsatisfied, and he's having a match with Jericho, which the match was really good. Like, it was a really good match. It was the best match of this show because I don't know if you remember Payback 2013. That was the same show with Cena and Ryback in the 3 Stages of Hell match. So this is by far the best thing on the show. But, outside of that, there was nothing to it. It was just, here's a good match.
Yeah, the main thing I remember from this era is, the hijacking fans. This was the big Ziggler cash-in.
Oh, kill me.
And then you would have people chanting Randy Savage and JBL, and you have JBL going, Bagel, they love me here. These fans love me in this arena, Bagel. That's really what I remember from this specific time frame, the WrestleMania 29 season. It was they did Jericho and Punk, and it was just the crowd chanting CM Punk the whole time. It was nothing. It was a shell of the feud they had in 2012. There was no rhyme or reason for it. And then I remember Jericho's feuding with Curtis Axel for the Intercontinental title after this. And he's feuding with Ryback. And then Ryback just beats him up one day on Raw, and it's like, oh, there goes Jericho. We're not going to see him for a while. It's just... The theme here is Jericho's in and out. Jericho came in for 6 months. If something interested him, he'd stay. If he wasn't interested in what creative had for him, he'd leave. That was pretty much what it was.
Basically, this whole thing in 2013, they're trying to make Curtis Axel seem like the next big thing. Keep in mind, this is Michael McGillicuddy from season 2 of NXT. This is that same guy.
Was this when they had him give Triple H a concussion? Was this around the same time?
Yes, he beat Triple H or something. He had a match with Cena on Raw. Paul Heyman was his manager. You had a backstage segment where I think it might have been Cena was cautious about facing Curtis Axel. And it's what is this? So Jericho loses to Curtis Axel. He has a match with Ryback and Money in the Bank. And it's just what is this, dude? This is 2013, where it was literally, let me paint the picture of WWE. Brock Lesnar, Triple H, Undertaker, they're all the big stars, and they're all part-timers. Punk is basically a part-timer by this point. You've got Cena's the champion who half the audience hates and, doesn't want to keep watching because of, and then The Rock's a part-timer as well. That's the whole main event scene. Outside of that, it was just a bunch of guys. It was Ziggler. It was Alberto Del Rio. It was Sheamus. It was Ryback. It was just, there wasn't really anything there. So Jericho, he's in this stuff with Ryback. He's like, stuff this, I'm leaving. And then he just goes and does more Fozzy stuff. And then he comes back the next year, Kevin,
Yeah, he comes back and he attacks the Maz, who had just made his triumphant return because everybody was waiting for The Miz to make his return on the June 30th, 2014 episode of Monday Night Raw. You in Australia, you were telling all your Aussie friends, look, you can't go to the Outback tonight. You got to come home and watch The Miz make his triumphant return. And then Jericho ruined The Miz's triumphant return. and was like, I was like, oh man, I was really hoping to see what The Miz had to say. And then Jericho beat him up, and why is Jericho here? To beat up Mike Mizanin? Like that's what he agreed for? I don't know. I might have been at this episode of Raw. I went to a Raw in Miami around this time when he started feuding with Bray Wyatt, and neither Bray Wyatt or Jericho were on the show. They just showed this interview where Jericho was like, I love wrestling. Can't wait to get in the ring with Bray Wyatt. He seems to be, a pretty dark character. We're going to have this good match at SummerSlam. We'll see if Bray Wyatt can, bring out the evil side of Y2J like he did to Cena. And that was it. It was like, why is Jericho here? For what?
Yeah. It was just more like, it was more secondary stuff. Like the Bray Wyatt thing, I remember, this was when I was like avidly watching at the time. And what were people watching Raw for? People were objectively watching Raw because the whole main event scene on Raw was Cena and Dean Ambrose against the Authorities, Rollins, Kane, and Randy Orton. That was the whole Raw main event scene in this time period. Essentially, then you had the Bella Twins having their big saga. You got Jerry Springer and the Bella Twins every week on Raw. It was horrific. You got the Bunny and Adam Rose. Like, this is that era for Raw. And Jericho is just having matches with the Wyatt family. This is Wyatt family post the Cena storyline, where Cena AA'd Bray Wyatt through a crate and put a box on him and buried him at Payback. So Jericho is just having matches with Bray Wyatt. He has a match with Randy Orton at Night of Champions. Jericho's wrestling some live event matches. He's just kind of there again. Like, he's not really doing anything, like, bruh.
Yeah, he had this riveting storyline where Randy Orton beat him up in the trainer's room. Just wow. Oof. Oh wow. Yeah, not much really happened. Like there was one moment, right, where he got F5'd by Brock, and then we didn't see him for a while after that. Like, that's pretty much all I remember.
Yeah, he went missing, and then literally they did the Tough Enough hosting thing, which I talked about earlier, and we talked about earlier with the Jericho Michaels match. He did the Tough Enough thing, and then the next thing he really did of note was when he just randomly came back, just in late 2015, and it's like, okay, and like, what was he doing there? Like, he appeared at Beast in the East. Wow. What was Beast in the East? Wasn't that the show where Brock Lesnar had a match against Kofi and squashed him? Was that what was like?
Something like that.
Like, nothing he is really like, I'm looking through Jericho's career. It's like, he wrestled at some live events. He in 2016 came around. Jericho then had a feud with AJ Styles, which I guess is like the next notable thing we can talk about. So, yeah, 2016 Jericho Styles. Walk me through that one, Kevin.
Oh well, I thought AJ was done. I thought he was DOA, to be honest, because many of you don't remember, but his first feud was with the Miz, where it was like the Miz was pretending not to know who AJ Styles was, and then Chris Jericho saved us once again. Y2J saved the day. He saved AJ Styles' career, because I believe the original plan was Jericho and Ambrose at WrestleMania 32. Thank God. Thank the Lord up above that Jericho saved AJ Styles, because after he had a feud with The Miz, that would have been it. AJ Styles losing to The Miz on pay-per-view would have been the end of his career. So AJ Styles owes Jericho a massive thank you for saving his career. Like, that's really my biggest takeaway from it. The rivalry itself was like Jericho asking AJ Styles, who is AJ Styles? And AJ Styles kind of stuttering, being nervous, not really knowing what to say. Like, he just debuted in the company, like at the Royal Rumble. And then that's really, like, for me, that's what I remember mostly. They had a couple good matches at one of the pay-per-views leading up to WrestleMania. And then they had a good match at WrestleMania 32. And then that was it, really? Like, what do you have? What perspective do you have on it?
Honestly, all I remember from this is when I'm getting, like, this is early 2016. I'm like very disenfranchised with wrestling at this point, because I'm like, they're not really doing anything. Like, they're about a year and a bit into like the full, we're going to push Roman Reigns to the moon. You're having Roman Reigns as like the underdog babyface against the Authority, and it's like, well, Reigns is clearly better than like everyone there. And then meanwhile, you got Chris Jericho in this random, like you described the storyline there. You have like the Miz feuding with Styles. You have the Miz versus AJ Styles. You have AJ Styles breaking the Miz's teeth on like their first match, which was a great start. And then Jericho's just there cutting promos on behalf of AJ Styles, being like, this guy's wrestled all over the world. He's a great fighter. Miz, you should watch out. And then we get Jericho Styles at WrestleMania, which you mentioned Jericho saved Styles. Jericho saved us. I bet Dean Ambrose wishes he had a match with Jericho in hindsight. Instead, he had one of the worst WrestleMania matches ever with Brock Lesnar. But nonetheless, just generally, my perspective on this time period, I was just disenfranchised with just wrestling in general because Raw was horrible. 2016 Monday Night Raw was really bad, like really bad. SmackDown was pretty dead for the first 8 months. So, that's my perspective, Kevin. You know,
yeah, there's just not much. I guess we could fast forward to the ever so infamous. I want to say, I think I'm correct in my timeline.
It's the list of Jericho. It's the Owen stuff now, Kevin.
No, wasn't there the ever so infamous segment where Jericho or Jericho had a highlight reel and Dean Ambrose introduced us all to Mitch the Plant?
Oh, not Mitch the Potted Plant. Oh, for God's sake! I tried to make you forget that. Oh,
because we had Shane McMahon at this point. So for these fans, Dean Ambrose is going to bring a potted plant and name him Mitch. Like. We got to talk about this for like a minute and 30 seconds at best.
Okay, fine.
What in the hell is this? You have Dean Ambrose, a grown man who's trying to look like he's 19 again with long hair, walking out being like, "Oh yeah, I'm crazy. I'm a crazy guy. I got a pot. I got a potted plant. His name is Mitch. This is my plant, Chris." And then Chris Jericho's like, "Oh, that's your plant, huh?" Like he's talking to him like he's, I'm not even gonna say the word, but he's like, "Oh, that's your plant, buddy? Wow." And Jericho and Ambrose like. No, yeah, this is my plant, Chris. This is my best friend. And it's like, what am I watching? Why is this on television? This makes anything.
What is this, bro? What is this?
This makes almost anything that's happened in 2021 better. Like, aside from the Miz nude with Maurice backing up into him, everything else that's happened in 2021, like I'd rather watch Shane McMahon play hopscotch than Dean Ambrose going, "Hey Chris, check out my plant, Chris."
They found this potted plant in the underground offices of the building of one of the arenas they were in. This wasn't like some great creation. Jericho just stole the plant from some office.
Right.
This whole thing. I'd be lying if I said I was watching at the time. By this point, I could not watch Raw. Raw was insufferable at this point. The show was so bad. It was Roman Reigns coming out there being like, "I'm the big dog." And then AJ Styles coming out there, failing miserably at a promo, being like, "I'm a great wrestler, and we're going to fight for that title." And the OC was just there. And then you've got Jericho and Mitch having these segments where like the potted plant's there, and Jericho's like, "Well, Dean, that plant has a name." And Ambrose is like, "Well, what's the plant's name, man? And then it's like they have this Ambrose Asylum match where legit Jericho ends up taking this horrible bump in the thumbtacks where his back's like bleeding and like all of this, and they're fighting over a plant that they found in the office of some arena. What?
Can I say this too? Shed some light on this. One good thing that came from this Ambrose-Mitch rivalry is that Jericho started wearing a scarf and he started calling everyone in the crowd stupid idiots. It's another ailment of Jericho, another little layer, and this began the next great run of his career. I remember fondly the stupid idiot promos when he would do like Tom Phillips be interviewing him and he'd be like, "Oh, Tim, John, Mike, whatever your name is, you're a stupid idiot." And then Tom Phillips would be like, "Oh, but my name is Tom." Okay, Rob, you're a stupid idiot. It was good. It was good stuff. It was good PG comedy, but Dean Ambrose, "Oh, hey, this is my plant." Like that's what everybody remembers,
Yeah, because legit, the thing with Jericho, we'll transition this into like the final phase of this part of the bio. The whole Jericho Owens thing, really, Jericho's talked about this in many interviews. Essentially, Jericho was at such a phase of his career, he felt like he'd get anything over. And as juvenile as Stupid Idiot is, which it's like a WWE, like apparently like a blacklisted term on TV, because it's that juvenile, it's that bland. Like someone says, "Oh, you're a stupid idiot." It's like a 4th grade playground insult. But it was Jericho's delivery and how he said it and how he built up to it, then how he delivered it, that it made it okay. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It was like I said, PG comedy at best. And it was proof that Jericho could get anything over. I mean, he started with the list of Jericho. And it kept going, It was like Kevin Owens and Jericho, they became best friends. Jericho started putting people on a list. Like this man, Chris Jericho, got a piece of paper and a pen over on live television. That just goes to show you, if nothing else, the greatness of Chris Jericho. He got a scarf over, a plant, a piece of paper and a pen.
Kevin, how many wrestlers can't even get themselves over nowadays? Literally most of them. And Jericho got over a pen. He got over the phrase "stupid idiot." He got over a thing called the list. He got over a scarf. He got over he got over literally everything. And that's Jericho in this 2016, 2017 time period. The guy could just make magic out of near enough anything, which is great.
Exactly.
He made the word "it" over. He got the word "it" over.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember specifically one segment where he's interviewed by Tom Phillips, and they just show a close up of Jericho's face, and everybody in the crowd is hotly anticipating Jericho pulling out the pen, and then he pulls the pen out, he clicks it, and the crowd goes crazy, and he's just like, you know what, Phil, you just made the list, and Tom Phillips is like, oh, my name's Tom, and then Jericho's like, well, Tom just made the list too. And then it's like everybody's cheering. It's like everybody's waiting for him to just click a pen. It was what's the word? It was unique. It's safe to say we'll probably never see anything like that again in wrestling.
And that might be for the better, considering the nature of the comedy. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah. Then we get the Jericho and Owens tag team. They're these best friends. You got Kevin Owens screaming, "Oh, I love you, Chris. You're my best friend." Blah blah blah. Really like a lot of cringe buddy cop stuff between the two for the better part of late 2016. Is there anything memorable that you can think of from the Jericho Owens partnership?
I remember distinctively when Kevin Owens won the title, I literally said, I can't watch this show anymore. I turned off Raw. I couldn't watch it. It was 3 hours as is, and then your world champion's my next door neighbor. So I just turned it off. But looking back, literally what Raw was for the next 5 months, from when Owens won the title, I believe the last Raw of August 2016, through to essentially basically the Goldberg stuff at Fastlane, literally every week on Raw was some variation of Jericho and Owens versus Reigns and Rollins. Either a singles match, a tag match, there'd be a Jericho interview or a Jericho and Owens segment where they'd insult Tom Phillips, they'd insult Mick Foley, they'd insult Braun Strowman, and that was Raw. And it was the best thing on Raw by a mile. Not that there was much competition, because that was back when, we're going to make history with the women. We're going to have Charlotte Flair main event every show. That's essentially what they're doing back then. So, yeah, that was Raw in 2016. Jericho was by far the best part of it. Not that that's saying much, but it was a good run for Jericho. No doubt about it, pal.
Oh, yeah. It was his last great run in WWE. I remember one segment where he was where he started calling himself the GOAT, and he put Tom Brady on the list. He's like, oh, Tom Brady, you took my nickname. You're going on the list. And that was one of the funnier, most memorable moments from this run. And it was on SportsCenter. I think Tom Brady responded. It was a really good moment, But, I mean, other than that, it was primarily just, this was legit. I'm not making this up. For about, from August to January of 2016 and 17, it was Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens standing there with Tom Phillips, with Jericho and Kevin Owens calling Tom Phillips anything but Tom Phillips. Phil, Bill, Jim, Rick, whatever you want to call it. And then Jericho just putting random people on the list. Jericho would go back and he'd put Ron Simmons on the list. Ron Simmons would yell, damn. Kevin Owens would be like, oh, put him on the list. Put him on the list. And Jericho would be like, don't tell me who to put on the list. That's really what we got for the better part of 6 months.
Legit, you can thank the New Day for making it, putting it over so much, because, Jericho said this himself. The one where he put the New Day, each of them on the list one by one.
Oh, yeah.
And,
iconic.
The way the New Day sold it, that made it. Because if when, Jericho says, Xavier Woods, you just made the list. If Xavier Woods goes, okay, and no sells it, then the whole gimmick's dead. But Xavier Woods was freaking out as though literally his house has been burnt down in in a bushfire. And he's freaking out. And Big E and Kofi are laughing at him. Then he puts, Big E on the list. And the whole thing was brilliant. So that segment made the list gimmick. It set it up for the next 6 months. The New Day can be thanked for the list by and large. So that was really good. And I guess we'll near enough wrap this up with Fastlane and then Wrestlemania, pal.
Yeah, exactly. I just gotta say about the New Day segment. Yeah, that was I forgot about that one. Now that I remember it, it's playing back in my mind. That really was a good segment. But yeah, so this is again creative differences with Chris Jericho and Vince McMahon. It was like they never saw eye to eye. Jericho and Owens were told, look, you guys are going to go to WrestleMania 33, and you're going to have this match for the Universal Championship. And then, I don't know, a week before Fastlane, Vince's like, oh, pal, Kevin, you're going to drop the belt to Bill Goldberg here, and we're going to have Bill Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar, because, part-timers, they feed us here at WWE. So we get, Goldberg getting squashed by Goldberg squashing Kevin Owens. We get this at Fastlane, and yeah, okay, it happened. Whatever. Like we talked about that a million times. And then we have Jericho and Owens at WrestleMania 33. Jericho's just like, screw this, I don't really care, don't want to be here. He and Owens go out, they have this okay match for the United States Championship. Jericho wins the United States Championship. He's a big babyface. He gets this really good entrance with a big inflatable list and all this stuff. Really good entrance. But it was just like, all right, like we were carrying Raw for 6 months, and our repayment is having a United States Championship match going second on the card at WrestleMania 33. And that's it. Like, that's the repayment, what they did for 6 months, all that hard work.
Yeah, pretty much. It went from, Jericho, you're going to main event with Kevin Owens. That's going to be the main event on the show, which, who knows how we view WrestleMania 33 if the main event was Jericho and Owens, the Universal title. Who knows how that show is looked back upon? I mean, maybe it's looked back upon with immense reverence, but, like, if you take the match Jericho and Owens gave you second on the card, put that in the main event, had the Universal title on the line, would that have made WrestleMania any better? Not really. It would have been basically the same show. So, in that regard, I don't know. Was it the right decision having Goldberg and Brock for the Universal title when it didn't really need it? I mean, yeah, it's one of them. It's like a tiki-taka booking decision. You go either way and you can justify it. You can make a case for it. It's not like, oh, Vince McMahon's Satan because he did that. It's like, I don't know. It's a bit of a contentious one. But yeah, Jericho and Owens, they go on second at WrestleMania. Match is okay. Owens wins the title. It's kind of forgettable. It's like, okay, they did the match, and then coming out of that Jericho, everyone thought Jericho was going to leave, wins the title back, loses it like the next day, and then rode off into the sunset, really. Anything else?
I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, I'll just briefly run down what he did. He loses the title at Payback to Owens, and that's pretty much it. He makes random appearances, like losing to Hideo Itami. He has
what a joke. Disrespectful to Jericho. Losing Hideo Itami. Ugh, sickening. Horrible.
Yeah, exactly. He has a triple threat match with Owens and AJ Styles in July of 2017. And then he shows up like almost a year later at the 25th anniversary of Raw. He puts Elias on the list. He shows up at the Greatest Royal Rumble. He gets eliminated by Braun Strowman. And that's really it. That was his final appearance in WWE.
During that time, a certain thing with Kenny Omega happens, a certain thing in the Tokyo Dome happens, and that's where we're going to leave it before part 2 of the bio. So, Kevin, any closing words about Jericho's first run, let's say?
I think overall in closing, I would say Chris Jericho had a unique career. A career of invention, reinvention, constantly staying up with the times. He was never satisfied. Like when you look at somebody like a Randy Orton, who's been the same character for the better part of 18 years, Chris Jericho has had, in every run in WWE, he's had different iterations. And he's always tried to be different, always tried to stand out. And, he'll probably be infamous, too, for some of the bad booking decisions that he's had to deal with. Not necessarily his fault, but, losing to Fandango. Going on second with Kevin Owens' United States Championship. I think he'll be more known for that than just about anything. And then, yeah, he has some great matches thrown in there. The matches with Shawn, the feud with Shawn, the 2 feuds with Shawn. Complicated legacy, but a good one nonetheless. He has a lot of fans. There's a lot of people that adore Chris Jericho. They absolutely just love him. They think he's one of the GOATs of wrestling. One of the top 4 or 5 wrestlers to ever do it. And rightfully so. Jericho is, on the mic, he's one of the best. In the ring, he's one of the best. As a character, he's one of the best. He's got one of the coolest entrances, cool theme song. Overall, I think he's a total package for what you're looking for as a pro wrestler.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head about as well as you can. Jericho, as a wrestler, I've pretty much echoed all my sentiments throughout this video. I don't want to just repeat myself ad nauseum, but just in real quick, in summary, the guy's a master of, always having his finger on the pulse, trying to make a change that will make him remembered more fondly, do something that will either elevate him and, do more, elevate him and not in a way to where it's like, oh, it's politics, he's selfish, he's ruining the show, but elevate himself in a way that will benefit the show, make it more entertaining, make a Jericho segment fascinating, and really just build the Jericho brand and keep growing his legacy. So those are my final thoughts. Yeah, Kevin, pretty decent little bio today.
Absolutely, I enjoyed it, and yeah, like we said, we'll be back next week with part 2 of Chris Jericho. We'll be talking about modern day Chris Jericho. So yeah, check out for that, and we'll talk to you guys then.